Good morning, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Alexander, ASA, MNRA G1, Chief Public Affairs. I just have a few admin announcements before we begin the forum. There are 3x5 cards that are sitting on your chairs. If you will fill those out as the speakers are talking, when we get to the Q&A portion, there will be individuals who will be walking down the center of the aisles. If you'll pass those cards to them, they will bring the cards to us and we will get it to the appropriate person. They will read your question and answer the question appropriately. Also, the Office of Chief Public Affairs has surveys that they've handed out. If you will fill those out and give them back to the individuals at the door or at the appropriate location that they will identify for you. Okay. This time, we will have opening remarks by retired General Sutherland.
Hey folks, nice to see all of you. I wanted to stop by to just say a couple of words about this panel. I think it's fairly obvious from the folks sitting up here on the dais that the Army has taken this subject very seriously, and it's a subject to be taken seriously. After 3.5 days of doing this, I'm applying everything I ever learned about resiliency. My wife was a yoga person 100 years ago, and she told me just palms up, palms up. It's good for the soul, and it is good for the soul. What you're going to hear here today now is very important, and it's the Army trying to get out in front of some very difficult curves and stresses which are out there in the force. I'm proud that we have been able to gather such a group together for this session here at our annual meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to General Bromberg, and he will introduce the panel and they'll go from there. But I want to thank everybody for what you're doing in this important area. Thanks a lot, and thanks for your support. Nice to see all of you. Hey, by the way, take that tape home with you, that DVD on Arlington National Cemetery. That's worth watching without everybody talking in your ear, because there have been huge steps made to get that whole thing straightened out. So anyway, thanks a lot to all of you.
Thank you, General Sullivan. Appreciate the intro. First, on behalf of General Austin, who would be here today, and he's very sorry he can't, so I don't want to mistake that his non-ability to be here today is lack of importance for the Army. As you can see from the group here to the right, you have pretty much the senior leadership that's responsible for most areas that, if not all areas, that center on resiliency. So, obviously, for my right is the Sergeant Major of the Army, Sergeant Major Army Chandler, Surgeon General Lieutenant General Horoho. Mr. Danny Pummelf comes to us from the Veterans Affairs, and we have an amazingly strong partnership with the Veterans Affairs as well as several other interagency organizations for America. Lieutenant General Farrader, MCOM Commander. And we have General Dave Bishop, who's the Warrior Transition Unit Commander, and then Lieutenant General Dan Allen, who's Commanding General 18th Airborne Corps and Senior Commander at Fort Bragg. And so we hope today is each of us will give some slight introductory comments, and any one of our topics that we're going to talk about, we could individually fill the whole block of time, but that's not our intent today. Our intent today is to hit some high points and then have a dialogue, a discussion with you, so you can understand where we're trying to go with ready resiliency and then how it applies across the force and the importance of it to the force. Because as the Chief talked in his opening comments about resiliency, what we do now in this window of opportunity will help us shape the force for the next 10, 15, and 20 years. So it's absolutely critical that we focus on resiliency and readiness, because they're definitely inextricably linked. You can't have a ready force that's not a resilient force. I think it's important for us to keep in mind the readiness aspect about what we're trying to do here. And so, as you know, that we've asked a lot from our soldiers and our families and our organizations for the last 11 plus years. And we're going to continue asking it more in the future. We're going to go through some challenging times here. Because of that, this isn't a free business. And there's a cost to all this. There's a cost in personal stress and personal loss, And of course, that has effect on the overall Army's readiness. So we have to address this challenge today, and we have to address it today for the future. Because again, it is about not just taking care of people, but it is also about the future readiness of the Army. So I think it's a very timely topic, and I think you'll see today from the discussion that we're wrestling with some tough and complex issues. But we do know that if we communicate with our leadership and put leadership in charge in the right places, that we'll be able to execute our responsibility about caring for our soldiers and their families, as well as maintaining readiness as the nation expects us to do. So when the nation calls, we're prepared to do that. So I would like to just talk about one or two topics real briefly, and then I'll pass it over to the Sergeant Major of the Army. I want to go back. For some of you might have heard, we took a health of the force trip at that time as we were trying to establish and define the problem. We did that with the Vice in July. And some things we saw during that time, and I want to make sure that we highlight for you, is we definitely know that leadership is engaged and leadership cares. That we saw that time and time again, no matter where we went. And we saw soldiers that are extremely enthusiastic and extremely proud of what they've accomplished, whether they've been in for 1 year or been in for 20 years. It didn't matter who we talked to. Extreme pride in the force. And we also understood in greater detail the complexity of the issues we're facing, and the fact it's going to really require a very sophisticated solution to move us forward in the future. And we know we can do better than what we're doing today. But it's going to require the whole Army team together to pull it off. And it's going to really be key to, as I said several times already, I don't want this to sound too repetitive, but it is about readiness. It's about readiness and care. And it's important that we do that so we're ready for the next fight. We took the results of that visit, and we have an X-Ord coming out in the final stages right now that'll precede the campaign plan that we'll talk about some more as we go through the discussion points today. And that's really focused on just some things we saw that we could change in terms of policy or procedures that could be handled very quickly and without a lot of fanfare, that could help the units at the point end of the spear down at the installations and the company troop battery levels to help them build ready, resilient soldiers earlier. So that's ongoing. I want to switch just quickly to one of the key topics we've talked about, and that's suicide and suicide prevention. As you know, suicide is not just an Army challenge; it's a national challenge. The 2009 results that just came out from the CDC indicated that there are over 37,000 suicides in America today, and for the first time, the number of suicides in America have exceeded the number of homicides in America. So we are a part of America, and we have our challenges as well, but this is not just an Army problem. And I think it's going to take a national solution over time, of which we know the Army will have a key part of that in the future. And again, we just finished Army Suicide Stand Down Day on the 20th of September. And our goals on that Stand Down Day, and they'll continue through the years, is to improve our soldiers' resiliency, their coping skills, and identify at-risk individuals so we can intervene early to improve soldiers' readiness. And so that's, we'll talk more about suicide prevention with my colleagues on the panel today. But again, those are some of the things where we're focused on with suicide prevention. I want to shift to two other topics before I pass over to Sergeant Major of the Army. That's sexual assault response and prevention, or SHARP, as we know it today. And first of all, make it no mistake that we're extremely deeply committed to fixing and improving our ability to deal with sexual assault in our ranks. We also know that this is a commander's program, and we have enabled our commanders with additional resources, everywhere from criminal investigation capabilities at crime labs to additional advocates in organizations to non-commissioned officers filling roles as victim advocates and response coordinators. And we'll begin hiring civilians this year in FY13 to also fill in those ranks to increase capacity. We're looking at improving our training, and we'll continue to talk to the field constantly to find out what we need to do to improve our capability in this area. Lastly, I just want to talk about the integrated disability system. It gets a lot of discussion. Again, as I said, any one of these topics we could go on for 2-3 hours and discuss each one of these. But the disability system is extremely complicated, as you know. And with our VA partners, we have made a lot of improvement, as well as what the Surgeon General has done with complexity case management. And we're not where we should be in terms of moving people through the system in an appropriate manner. But most importantly, we are taking people through the system, and they're getting the care they need, and they're getting the service they need, and we have solved many more things than people realize. We have really closed the gap on a soldier receiving their benefits from the time they get out to the time they get their Veterans Affairs benefits, so they're not starting the process over again. We sometimes tend to forget that point, where a soldier used to get out and they would have to go wait a year and a half and go through the whole process again. We've taken that out of here, and we've made some great progress there. We're also working very closely with the reserve components to identify those soldiers who have served but may still have some medical issues, and they'll also need to go through the process to get the benefits they deserve and the care they deserve. So, are we where we should be on IDES? More work to do. Complicated, very, very complicated process, but I can tell you we are making tremendous progress in that area. So with that, I'm going to stop there because I don't want to take up too much more time, and I want to pass it over to Sergeant Major Yarn. Sergeant Major.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. So, was honored to be a part of the group that traveled to look at the health of the force and provide some feedback to the senior Army leadership, and then very grateful for the Vice to include me in the health of the force work group from an enlisted perspective, and really focus on the areas of discipline and standards. The trip for me was really to focus on sexual assaults, hazing, and suicides, and then how our young soldiers and our more senior non-commissioned officers viewed this and what did we need to do. First of all, I was actually encouraged in many circumstances where if you have engaged leaders understanding their roles and responsibilities, you had success. And for those that may not have been as well engaged with some ideas on how to become more engaged or their responsibilities, you saw the light bulb start to go off. A very interesting discussion took place with how this ties to our ongoing efforts with the Army profession and our development of the Profession of Arms campaign, and tying that to the leader's responsibility, soldiers' responsibility to be the professional that they say they are. So if you look at character, commitment, and competence, which are how we define our profession, those three items, we tend to focus on the competence piece. You know, what's your job, looking at badges, skills, and et cetera, and tend less to focus on character and commitment, which are just as important as competence. I see my responsibility and role in this as we move forward to tie health of the force, which is a readiness concern, into the well-being aspect and then the profession. If we have a disciplined force, we have a more ready force, which in turn means our force is more healthy. All of those things work together. So we've got a program, the campaign of the Army profession that will roll out in January. The first quarter is focused on discipline and standards, and we'll be tying the XORD into our non-commissioned officer and leader development programs to focus on what that means. You know, if you talk about suicides, one of the things that we believe is that a more engaged soldier, a battle buddy is the term that we use, interested, knowing the person that he's the battle buddy with and understanding the basic aspects of what to look for and then what to do, will help us to roll back the suicides that we have. If you look at understanding the issues surrounding medical care so that the individual squad leader understands, hey, my soldier is in this process that, you know, we use MEB, PEB, IDES. He's wounded, he's ill, he's injured. I have a responsibility as a leader to be connected with that person throughout their entire time and to make sure that they still feel that they're a part of the team and are connected to the Army. Tremendous power in that, and it is a cultural shift. You know, for years we used the term broke. Well, if I'm broke, well, he's off to the side. No. The challenge is to make sure that the cultural shift is you are a valued member of this team, we are concerned for you, and we are going to care for you throughout this entire process. That feeling of being connected and not isolated. I think that's part of how we're going to move forward with this process. So we got great non-commissioned officers and soldiers out there that are doing amazing things. There are tremendous amount of challenges that the Department of the Army is going to help our young leaders be engaged. My challenge is to tie that to the squad leader so he or she understands why it's important and their role. If we can make that connection from the department to the squad leader, we'll solve this challenge. We'll solve each of the ones that have to do with the health of the force. I firmly believe, as the Vice has said many times, if we put the power of the Army, the power of every single leader towards solving an Army problem, it'll be taken care of. And we're doing that right now. Ma'am?
Thank you, Sergeant Major. You know, what you've just heard and what you'll continue to hear is I think it's massing fires, and that's what we're doing is we looked as an Army to see what's all the capability that we need to bring together to really improve the readiness and the health and the resiliency of the force. And so what I'd like to do is just share a little bit of kind of the firepower that we're bringing from a medical perspective and touch some highlights and then be open to a lot of questions afterwards. So when we've been looking over the last several years, we focused a lot on treatment. Our shift now is really looking at prevention, keeping a very robust healthcare system, but moving more towards prevention, intervention, and rehabilitation, and focusing on maintaining, improving, and restoring health. So regardless of where you are on that health continuum, that's going to be our focus to get you well. So when we look at behavioral health, one of the things that we found with doing some pilot projects is that when we embedded our behavioral health providers, took them out of our bricks and mortar military treatment facilities and embedded them within our brigade combat teams and the units and having that habitual relationship, we've actually helped to decrease the stigma. We've increased the health of the force, and they've got that feeling that they know that person and they feel much more comfortable. And then when we coordinated care, so what we found is when we sent soldiers into battle in Afghanistan and Iraq, just by doing some care coordination, we decreased the amount of behavioral health evacuations that occurred. We increased the care that was being coordinated. We increased the knowledge of our commanders so that they knew those that needed behavioral health support, and we were able to marry that up. So we're now taking embedded behavioral health, and that's going to be a standard across our entire Army, and we're going to embed that in our brigade combat teams and then also our sustainment and supporting units. With that, we looked at embedding our behavioral health within our primary care, because what we wanted to do is as we focus on the stigma, is not have someone go into a behavioral health center, but rather go into primary care, access health care, and if there became a behavioral health issue, then that behavioral health provider was right there to be able to marry up and really look at the person holistically. We're also using telebehavioral health and theater. One of the things as we move towards prevention is instead of waiting for a soldier to come back and then deal with those issues and with the challenges that they may have faced or just the interactions that they had during a battle, we're able to now have telebehavioral health take a capability using IT to get that out to some of our most remote areas. And so we've got 87 different nodes within Afghanistan that's allowing us to get that behavioral health to some of our most forward COPs and FOBs. In addition to that, we've overhired behavioral health providers. We've doubled the amount of providers over the last several years, and we've looked at it not just from psychologists and psychologists, but we've looked at it from the healthcare team. So it's also our social workers, our psych nurse practitioners, and our behavioral health medics in that. And the note that I want you to realize with that is that 80% of those that are diagnosed with PTSD actually heal and return to duty. So we're looking at about a 20% on the IDES process so that they can focus on helping those members that need to go through that service line. We've stood up a behavioral health service line. We're in the middle of standing it up. And what that does is we noticed we had variance across the capabilities of Army medicine providing behavioral health. So we're putting out clinical practice guidelines to standardize the treatment of behavioral health. We're looking at that being an AMED headquarter capability so we can leverage it through telebehavioral health and surge a capability where we may not be able to hire within the civilian community. So a lot of work that's being done in that area, as well as rolling out a behavioral health data portal, which will allow us to evaluate the outcome of the treatment. And that'll be the first time, civilian and military, that we've been able to do that. So that is a big change. We're focusing a lot on concussive care. We've got a joint innovation venture with the NFL, because when you look at concussions, over 90% of our concussions actually occur in garrison. And so they're not a small percentage is actually IED related. And what we've done is we've got a clinical practice guideline that we've been using in Afghanistan and 11 concussive care centers, and what we found is 97% return to duty rate just by following the protocol that's there and then having our neuroscientists that are in theater. So a lot of work that's being done in the deployed environment. We now need to shift it to the garrison so that we have the right capability to be able to treat in that area. And then we're looking at moving from healthcare to health. And so we're looking at sleep, activity, and nutrition as being the performance triad when we really want to improve the health of our force, and being able to have leaders look at sleep the same way that you do water discipline, personal protective equipment, that the leaders would also manage their sleep. So that's a new direction that we're moving and looking at new vital signs in that area. And then what I'd like to do quickly then also is just talk a little bit about some of the medical innovations that we have. We're looking at rapid biomarker testing to see whether or not there is whether within your blood we can analyze to see if you have a concussion, so that we can have a better way to detect that. We're also looking at an automated binocular vision tester to see if you did have a concussion, was there any ocular dysfunction or impairment from that. And then they're testing right now they're testing right now a blast disseminator to see whether or not the impacts of an IED blast and how many that you've got. So that's being tested right now. And then also a brain scope ahead for that would be able to see whether or not there's any brain changes that would then download into your smartphone. And the reason why I just share a couple of those, we've got $2 billion that is being looked at research across many forms in health, but I think we owe it today to ask those questions now and research them to see what are the answers that we may need to have ready for the future. So that's the focus that we're doing right now within Army Medicine. Thanks.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting the Veterans Administration this morning. Secretary Shinseki sends his best and wishes you all a very successful annual meeting of the AUSA this year. When Secretary Shinseki came into the VA 4 years ago, he set some priorities. The priorities that he set were he wanted to increase veterans' access to VA benefits and services. He wanted to end the claims backlog by 2015, and he wanted to end veterans' homelessness by 2015. A corresponding priority was he wanted to develop better and closer relationships with the Department of Defense and the military services. We realize in the VA that everything that happens in the military gets transferred with individuals later on in their civilian lives. When they retire, they leave because they're wounded, or they just end their term of service. All the problems that you'll hear up here on the panel today that we have with soldiers and their families, we have those same problems in the VA. So it's just a continuation. So the best way to take care of those problems is to develop the best possible seamless transition of military members and their families from active duty, from the Guard and the Reserve, to their civilians' lives as they live. And the only way to do this is to get inside the decision loop with the Department of Defense and the military services. I'm pretty proud of what's happened over the last couple years. Secretary Shinseki has met with Secretary Gates and then Secretary Panetta 10 times over the last 20 months, personally met. Their primary topic of discussion and what their staff prepares them for is the proper transition of service members of all components, from their services over to the VA, from the medical records. We talk about suicides, risk assessment, the IDES program, transition assistance program. I'm proud to say the Department of the Army has kind of been leading the way in this. Right now, the VA meets with the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army approximately 2 times every month to go through in detail with his entire Army staff the IDES problem and how we're transitioning soldiers through the IDES system into the VA. We meet with the Surgeon General and her staff almost weekly, and my guys work with the Surgeon General and the commanders out there in the field every single day to effect a proper transition of these soldiers into the VA system. The Navy has now copied what the Army has done, the Air Force has picked up on it, and the Marines are joining in too. So it's pretty much, it was nice to have the Army leading the way, And I think we have achieved one of those goals for Secretary Shinseki in getting inside those decision loops. All of our priorities that we have in the VA are absolutely contingent upon that warm handoff, that transition. If we can get that right, we can lessen that impact when the service member moves from their military life into their civilian life. And I'll just end up saying, I look forward to all the questions that you may have. We'll go into more detail. But there's a lot more to the Veterans Administration than most people know. Most people know that we have 152 medical centers. We have over 800 community outpatient clinics. We have 300 vet centers. We have 1,300 healthcare access points. Everybody knows that there's VA hospitals. They're in the news all the time. We work very, very carefully with the Army, with polytrauma, TBI injuries, transfer of the severely wounded, ill, and injured into the VA system. But we also run some other things that a lot of people don't hear about every day, and we want to make sure that soldiers and their families are aware of those benefits when they leave, too. For instance, we have 56 regional offices that provide disability compensation. Right now, to about 3.5 million veterans are receiving disability compensation. A lot of these veterans really need this disability compensation. This compensation sometimes is the difference between them having a home, a place to live, or living on the streets. We're second only to the Department of the Education in providing educational benefits. Right now, we administer and provide $10 billion annually of post-9/11 GI Bill and other education programs. We also run a vocational rehabilitation program for veterans at college universities throughout the country. We guarantee 1.6 million home loans through the VA Home Loan Program. It's the only zero-down equity home loan program in the nation, and we're proud to say that we have the lowest foreclosure rate in the nation, 2.25%. The reason we have that is because the VA doesn't want veterans and their families to lose their homes. We bend over backwards. We work with the banks and the veterans, do everything we can to keep them in their homes to work things out. We also run the 8th largest life insurance company in the United States. We have 7.1 million clients. We run SGLI, TSGLI, and VGLI, excuse me. And for the past 10 years, we've been a top-rated organization taking care of veterans. We know we can do better. There's 23 million veterans approximately in the United States right now. We want every veteran to have the opportunity to come to the VA and get the service and benefits they deserve. We want all the service members of all components and their families to be afforded the best possible transition. We thank the Army for all the assistance we're getting. We are literally embedded in all the major installations of the Department of the Army right now, to including the other services. We work with them on a day-by-day basis. Our regional directors know the post commanders by name, and once a month we have a meeting where the regional directors, the VISN, the hospital directors, and the installation commanders get online on a video conference and talk through the problems that they have and making sure that the soldiers are properly transitioned and have all the care and everything they need before they leave the military. That concludes my remarks. Thank you very much for your time. General.
Just a reminder, if you have questions and you're filling them out through our file card, please pass them down to the center, and the young lady here will take them and bring them to the front when we get to our Q&A portion. Thank you.
Well, I'm Mike Ferreter, and in my capacity, I wear two hats. The first is as the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management, and that's a role as an Army Staff Officer here on HQDA Army Staff. And I'm responsible for installation policy and development of the programs for implementation Army-wide. And secondly, I'm dual-hatted as the Commanding General of Installation Management Command, and our headquarters is in Fort Sam, Houston, and our people are around the world. And I'm joined today by Command Sergeant Major Earl Rice, my Command Sergeant Major, but we're actually joined today by everyone around the world, by the stream and video there, as well as the connection for the Secretariat and our Army staff, and then our commands as we come down the table all the way to General Allen and the senior commanders. This is what this panel so appropriately represents today. Now, Installation Management Command is a single organization with 4 regions, and it delivers installation services and synchronizes all happenings on our installations and the 74 big installations where we have troop densities. And our talented garrison commanders are the right-hand man to the senior commanders like General Allen here, and responsible to be the principal synchronizer of services that come onto an installation. Today, I'll talk and answer your questions about how the execution occurs at the garrison and what the intent of the outcome is. And in particular, I'm excited to talk about the work that helps for the resiliency and the readiness of our Army with regard to total Army sponsorship. And so if every soldier who moves from 06, every Department of the Army civilian, GS-15 and below, has a sponsor and stays connected during their move, then we will have an unblinking eye of need and care to take care of our folks. We're piloting sponsorship in Hawaii and Germany, Fort Lee, Virginia, and Korea in the next months to ensure that before someone moves, they have an assigned sponsor, and as they come on board, that they're received and really integrated into each installation. I'll be able to describe to you the actions we've taken in the last 6 months to return the barracks to our senior NCOs in the First Sergeant Barracks Program 2020. And you know, years ago, we gave those barracks over to we at the installation, to our civilians, to manage the property. And the unintended consequence of that was that we lost sight of what went on in the barracks, or often we separated our soldiers from their NCOs and the leadership that they deserve and should have. I can also and will answer questions on the sexual harassment assault program at the installation and the services and the continuity that we provide as those 2 NCOs per brigade combat team are assigned, and as the civilians come on board in each of the brigade combat team. And then finally, excited to talk about reinvigorated intramural program and all other Army community service programs and morale welfare programs at the installations to get our soldiers involved and engaged in healthy lifestyle. And then finally, we're teaming with the VA and the DOL for execution of the transition program, and with Colonel Mike Koss, who's here in the room, for the Soldier for Life program, so that at beginning 1 year out of ending time in service or retirement, that our soldiers are counseled and then brought through a program for transition. And then you'll see more and more about the continuity of the hiring fairs that each installation will run. In the last 3 or 4 months, we've run over 100 hiring fairs, and the idea is jobs, 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 jobs for our soldiers and for their spouses. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Dave Bishop, and I'm dual-hatted also as the Assistant Surgeon General for Warrior Care and Transition, but I'm also the Commanding General for Warrior Transition Command. I'll tell you that my role is much like a proponent for a branch. We're responsible for the Warrior Care program Army-wide and watching its implementation and looking for systemic improvements as we go forward. Our mission is to provide centralized oversight, advocacy, and guidance to empower wounded, ill, and injured soldiers, vets, and their families with a comprehensive transition plan to enable them to successfully reintegrate either back into the force or into civilian life. And really what's this mean? It means taking care of soldiers and families now and in the future. And it's about fulfilling a sacred obligation and maintaining trust with our soldiers that we're going to take care of them in the long term. Since 2007, we've had 55,000 soldiers come through our program. And I'm happy to say that of those 55,000, 51% have been returned to the force. What does that translate into? It's readiness. Those are soldiers that we don't have to train and we don't have to bring back into the force and recruit. It also translates into direct cost avoidance for the Army of an estimated $6.1 billion over those years, which can also be reinvested right back into readiness. We currently have 29 Warrior Transition units Army-wide. We also have 9 community-based Warrior Transition units, which are out in the outer line communities away from Army installations, that through remote means provide the same case management, care, and leadership that the Warrior Transition units do. We have currently 10,155 wounded, ill, and injured soldiers in our program. And I'll tell you that we've got 4,382 very dedicated, committed cadre that are taking care of those soldiers and their families each and every day. We also have the Army Wounded Warrior Program, which is under the directorship of Colonel Tim Karcher right now. It used to be Colonel Greg Gadsden. They fall under Warrior Transition Command as well. And they have 200 advocates that connect to our most seriously wounded, ill, and injured soldiers that are out there on active duty in many cases, or who have just transitioned, and they serve to connect them to the VA and other DoD programs to make sure that they have a soft landing, and if they ever need help, they can come back up on the net and have long-term points of contact to assist them as necessary. This program is run based on a triad of care concept. It's a nurse case manager, primary care manager, and a squad leader. Those are the three where the rubber meets the road individuals that make sure that our soldiers get through this program successfully with the right care they need. And I can't say enough about our nurses. They play such an important role. We also need a triad of leadership. And the triad of leadership is basically the senior mission commander on the installation, the warrior transition unit on the installation commander, and the MTF commander. So those three individuals provide the top-down leadership for this program on each installation, with significant help from the garrison commander and General Ferreter's team at AXIM and IMCOM. The centerpiece for doing this is called what we call the Comprehensive Transition Plan. The Comprehensive Transition Plan is the policy guidance we give to all the cadre to take our soldiers in and get them through this process successfully and with care and dignity and respect and self-determination. It's based on the domains of comprehensive soldier fitness, and we've added one for career. I'll tell you, we're tied in with the VA, we're tied in with OSD, and the biggest thing we do is we connect warrior transition units and soldiers to the right people to help them get what they need. A resilient cadre is a major focus of mine. I've been here for about 3 months now, and I can see that it's a very tough job for these soldiers to go out to a warrior transition unit and take on such a sacred obligation for our wounded, ill, and injured soldiers. So we're looking at ways to improve the training and resilience of the soldiers that are selected for this. And I can tell you we've got some great people out there doing this job every day, and we've got a lot of success stories. We're also looking at the long-term force structure requirements for the warrior transition units. It's a sacred obligation, it's an enduring mission, and we're going to help the Army make good, sound decisions about the structure and resourcing and the ways ahead. I'd also like to emphasize 2 points before I pass on to General Allen. A lot of people don't realize that the warrior transition units are comprised of wounded, ill, and injured soldiers. I'll tell you that 10% of our population is combat wounded. The rest of them are seriously injured or very seriously, gravely ill individuals that need the same care and concern that wounded soldiers require, and we take care of all of them the same. And it's also not universally understood that we're a multi-compo organization in mission. So we have compo 1, 2, and 3 both in our population and in our cadre, and that's important to maintain that demographic so that we can provide the right leadership to the soldiers as they go through all this. With that, I look forward to answering your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And Dan Allen, 18th Airborne Corps Commander and Senior Commander for Fort Bragg and the surrounding community. We've heard a lot about the complexity of this effort. And if you look at the panel here, you're looking at about 20% of the complexity in terms of all the resources that have to be brought to bear for this to be a success. So what that means is it is a combined arms effort, and that's what our leaders do. The reason that we are a decisive land power, dominant around the world, is because our leaders each and every day synchronize all the capabilities within our Army to deliver the effects where they need to be to bring mission success on the battlefield. That same approach is what's going to deliver success with our Ready, Resilience, and Army Strong effort. So it is going to be a campaign plan where the senior commanders and the leaders at every level within our Army, from corps down to team and squad, will know the resources available to them, know the best tools available to them for the particular need that they've identified with their soldiers, and then rapidly deliver those to the point of need in a responsive way that addresses the soldier's issue and enables him to maintain readiness and contribute to unit readiness. So it is a combined arms approach, and it's about integrating, coordinating, synchronizing, and as Patty said here a moment ago, yes, once you've identified with precision, massing those effects to deliver what our soldiers and our units need. You've heard from several of these folks is it really comes down to leadership. And this is not a new responsibility. It has been the core of our success in the United States Army throughout our history, and it's why we'll deliver success in this effort as well. And the Chief mentioned the other day as we were talking about this that at its core, C-O-R-E, the health of the force is about values-based and readiness-centered. Okay? Well, that's the role of the leader. The leaders deliver that each and every day, and they deliver that by building trust every day with those they lead. And you've heard the SMA and others talk about the transitions that occur as our leaders and our soldiers move through the Army. So this trust building is a daily undertaking. It's like we learn as infantrymen in FM 7-8. You improve your foxhole every day. Okay, so for our leaders, they're improving that trust base every single day by delivering the soldier well enough to identify that need as rapidly as possible. You heard Mike Ferreter talk about this effort to integrate newly arriving soldiers in a seamless way as rapidly as possible. That's the part of our soldier team that is at greatest risk. It's when you're in a period of transition. So we're trying to ensure we have the right leaders focused from the pre-arrival all the way through so that they seamlessly reintegrate back into the new unit they're going to. Everybody in this room, I know, has experienced multiple moves. And you know what it's like to reattach your children into a new community. Not easy. It's hard. All right? Well, we do hard every day. We've just got to do it better and faster and more responsively to need. And the final point, it's always good to put a face on, so what is ready, resilient, and Army strong? I got to see that yesterday along with Command Sergeant Major Vimoto as we went to Bethesda. We had an opportunity to spend some time with Specialist Calvin Todd from Bravo Company 164 Armor from the Great Marne Division from Deerfield, New Hampshire. And if you want to talk about somebody going through transitions, here's a soldier who had less than a year in the Army, so he had transitioned into the Army. He had transitioned to a unit deployed in combat, and in the course of executing his duties as a combat medic, he had moved out under fire to rescue his wounded squad leader, hit an IED, and now is recovering with a below-the-knee amputation. Okay? So that's the soldier, all right? His spouse of just over a year gave birth to their son Gus 5 weeks ago. Okay, so they've got some life transitions going on in the midst of all that as well. Okay, but if you want to hear about ready, resilient, and Army strong, just look at this soldier and this spouse with this brand new child, and you hear a soldier talk about, I'm lucky, I'm blessed, I am alive, I have an opportunity to make a difference, and yeah, I don't have my lower left leg anymore. But I've got a wife who's looking after me, I've got responsibilities to my soldiers, and I just wish I'd gotten to my squad leader faster so that I could have helped him out more. And his number one concern, in addition to getting out of Bethesda and getting back into his unit, is getting there to welcome his unit home from combat, because that's where he feels he needs to be to make a difference as a combat medic and a soldier in the United States Army. So that is ready, resilient, and Army strong. Thanks. Look forward to your questions.
The way we're going to do the questions is we're going to go down the panel. Each panel member has already received the questions from the audience. So at this time,
I'll start with the first question, and then we'll go down. And some people have multiple questions already, so just ask if you just do one question, and we'll cycle back around. And feel free to jump in if you have another point to add on to your partner's question. So the first question I have is and I know that I'm sure General Horoho will want to add something on this one, is if she feels compelled to do that, but no. Just teeing it up. How do we reduce the timeline in the integrated disability system? And let me just start. This is, as I said before, this is a very complicated system. And as you know, the Department of Defense goal was 295 days. And what I ask everybody to keep in mind is let's not focus solely on the days. The most important thing is the care to the individual as they go through the process. And if we're giving that soldier the right care through the process, that's what's most important at the other end. And we've tried to articulate that as we go across. But clearly there's things we can do. And the first thing we've done is there's been several trips out specifically looking at the process. I personally did one over a year ago as a DCG at FORSCOM where we looked at every node along the way to see how we can improve the process. And several things we did was, for example, we said, let's look at our PEBLOs, our Physical Evaluation Board Liaison Officers, because those are really the most critical person who the soldier interfaces with on a daily basis. And what we found through that over time is we had to not only increase the number to handle the load, but we also had to increase the quality and the training and the care so they could understand the system better. So that's just one example. The second example we can talk to is as we looked at the overall system, we said we need to involve the leadership more. You heard about leadership up and down the row here today. So when I asked one soldier, you know, how did you get notified? He might have said, well, the doctor called me or I got a note from somebody. But there wasn't a formal leadership involvement process. So we've asked the leadership now to be involved so when the soldier's told he's going into a medical evaluation board process, he has a leader there as well as a medical professional so they can understand what's going to happen. Because a lot of folks don't understand that when they enter that medical evaluation board process, there's a high probability they're going to be discharged from the Army. And so we owe it to them to start that process earlier. So the last thing I'll mention is the Physical Evaluation Board. As you know, that's where once you finish the Medical Evaluation Board process, your packet goes to the Physical Evaluation Board for final determination. What we've done is we've increased the capacity of the Physical Evaluation Board by 55%, and we're increasing that again as we speak. By the end of October, there'll be another increase about 50%. And we've also taken the Physical Disability Agency, and we've appointed General Lou Boone as the director of that agency. It's now separate from the Adjutant General, and they report directly to me. So we're putting a laser focus on these processes. We're Lean Six Sigma and all the different sections of the process to ensure that we can take the most amount of work and inefficiencies out of there, to include going out and helping the reserve component soldier. I'm very worried about reserve component soldiers because they are out in hometown America, maybe being seen in the TRICARE network, what makes it even more complicated for them to get their paperwork sent back. So how do we do that? We're looking at that process in great detail right now. There is one other thing just to talk about the VA, and then I'll ask General Horvath if you want to talk about complexity case management successes. Is we've integrated the VA on almost every installation or in co-location facilities. And what that allows then is it allows the Medical Evaluation Board docs and members to start partnering with the VA immediately, and also it shows the linkage to the Veterans Affairs to the soldiers and their families on day one as well. So if you go to Fort Bragg, for example, since General Allen's here, they're all in the same building. So you can go start your Medical Evaluation Board process, and then you can also walk up to the 5th floor and see your Veterans Affairs job counselor. What we haven't broken the code on is getting the soldiers to think like that right now. That's going to be the hard piece, and that's why the leaders have to be involved. So I'll stop with that, but we have made progress. The numbers are coming down, but again, we're focused on care of that soldier and the family first. When we do that, we're convinced the numbers will come down. Patty, do you want to add anything?
Thanks, Howard. In addition to the things that General Romberg talked about, we also increased the number of paralegal assistants as well as the lawyers, because we looked at the whole throughput of that. And then when we focused on medical evaluation boards, a couple things that we started doing differently is, one, the use of e-profile and e-MEB allowed continuity of information and allowed our leaders from the very beginning to see who's on a profile and to initiate the disability process sooner when it needed to be, so it gave that clarity of information. We overhired, I talked about in our behavioral health providers. We also did that with our MEB providers. So we use tele-NARSMs, and what that means is that it has allowed us to take a capability and shift it to another area. So we have Tripler Army Medical Center in Hawaii being able to provide MEB capabilities, writing the narrative summary for Fort Hood when they had an increased surge. Madigan Army Medical Center was providing that capability in Alaska. So we're utilizing the IT systems to surge the capabilities to some of our more remote areas. We also came out with Annex O, and what that did is that we now have the Army Medicine accepting the VA's compensation and pension exam. So we were duplicating efforts by having us have that exam done and then the VA done, and then we were writing a variance memo when we had disagreements in there. We now accept the one C&P exam, which has allowed an increase in the throughput. And then in addition to that, we've used telebehavioral health. So we've now have 136 providers that are just focused on the IDES process. That's allowed it as well. And then lastly is the acuity base. What we looked at Fort Bragg is Fort Bragg was looking at those soldiers that had 5 or less conditions, and they were then taking those individuals and putting them through the system. And what that did is they were able to reduce, going through every of the same steps, but they were able to reduce it from over 120-something days down to about 23 days. So we now saw that that was a good process to have in place, and we're now utilizing that across the Army.
If you could read your question too, just so the audience knows. Thank you.
I got to ask the question is, what specifically is Soldier for Life, the Soldier for Life program? Is it a formal program, and where can I find more about it? You can find out more about it through Colonel Koss, who is seated in the second to last row, sir, if you could raise your hand. But Soldier for Life, to put it in a nutshell, is a way for the Army to connect the American people, businesses, not-for-profits, and other folks that want to help with the American soldier while they're serving and as they're transitioning, and to maintain that connection with the American soldier as they transition into civilian life. And the power behind that is to trying to bring together the whole of America to help our soldiers as they transition into the next phase, and to with really the basic premise that if a soldier has an outstanding experience while they're serving, that they're going to talk about that and their experience with those who they may come in contact with, which will help us to influence the next generation who may have a question about service to the nation. And that's really what I would say is the nexus of Soldier for Life. Extremely powerful program. It is immature at the current process as we build capacity. It's regionally aligned across the United States and overseas. And I'm very excited about it. It has both commissioned officers, Department of the Army civilians, and non-commissioned officers tying this together to help us engage with the American people. And I'm sure Colonel Koss would be happy to talk to you about it at the end of the session. One thing I'd like to add real quickly is, and the Vice does this much better justice than I ever will, is for everybody in this room and for those that may be listening, is to understand what it is that we ask our soldiers to do. Being a soldier in the United States Army is really the highest level of performance that we require of any human being. At the end of the day, we ask soldiers to exercise the national will. And for them, that means taking human life. If you think about that in terms that we not only ask them to do it once, but we ask them to do it repeatedly, over and over and over again, then we also have to accept that that comes with a cost. And that cost could be emotional, behavioral, physical. Understanding that, and understanding that we've got to change the culture, that it's okay to ask for help. We really expect you to ask for help, and we're going to provide the best level of care possible to help you to continue to perform at that exceptional level day in and day out, is really significantly different than anything else that we ask anyone. So at the end of the day, the cultural shift we want is that if you have to engage with and destroy the enemy, which means taking human life, that it's okay to ask for help, and we're there for you. Ma'am?
The question that I had was, how do we keep up the op tempo in how we're addressing issues such as PTSD or TBI as we go back to a peacetime climate? So a couple things with that. I think it's really looking at the initiatives that are focusing on health and prevention first. And so one of the things that we're doing across Army Medicine is we're rolling out the patient-centered medical homes. And the patient-centered medical homes is a primary care capability that will actually increase and improve the care experience by having a healthcare team that manages not just the soldier, but also manages the family. So it's care coordination. We're moving as much capability into our patient-centered medical homes. We're standardizing the process. We're embedding behavioral health into that. And then the other thing that we're looking at is taking the pain management task force capabilities and programs that have been developed and having that link with our patient-centered medical homes. And so our pain management task force has looked at the full array of capabilities from yoga, from acupressure, from acupuncture, from chiropractic. It's looking at alternative medicine and traditional medicine and being able to apply that where we really need that. And so that capability is going to be standardized across our medical centers and our community hospitals so that we have the right capability in the full spectrum. It's also looking at the 11 NICO centers that we're standing up, the National Centers of Excellence. The Fisher Foundation is funding 11 of those for us across the Army. And what we're going to be doing at those NICO satellites is actually synchronizing behavioral health care with concussive care, with our TBI care, because you can't separate out the symptoms from both of those. And what we want to have is the same thing that we started doing in Afghanistan, is synchronizing those capabilities so we're doing holistic care and treating. We're looking at behavioral health at the reintegration at every single touch point so that we have more interaction with our behavioral health providers in addition to the embedded behavioral health. And then I really think the work that we're going to be doing with the performance triad, and that is the sleep, activity, and nutrition, is going to help us. We've got to get, the left of the boom. We've got to get towards healthy and resilient soldiers and family members. And when we look at a force that has been deployed for the last 11 years and where we know we have disruptive sleep management capabilities in theater, we now have to have a way to wean them off of that and get them into better sleep habits and focusing on that, because research will show us that with disruptive sleep, it increases weight gain, it decreases cognitive functioning, and you think about that, those are two areas that then impact health and that impact the psychological health of our forces. So, and nutrition is a key part of that, as well as activity. And then the last thing that I would add with that is the use of telehealth. Not just telebehavioral health, but also telehealth. And it's looking at leveraging all of our capabilities through IT that gets a capability out into those very remote areas and gets a capability that allows a better standard across all of Army medicine. And so I think that's how we're going to be able to look. And there's so many other things in this area I could talk about, but I think that's the way we're going to be able to handle the health of the force in an area of a downsizing Army.
My question is, there's been an increase in cases of women vets dealing with homelessness and suicides. These are not just young single or divorced moms, but cover the wide spectrum of situations. These women vets are dealing with post-Iraq and current deployment in Afghanistan. What are plans and programs established for these women vets? Good question. When the current conflict started, the VA was pretty much set up, based on the last war, Vietnam. Mostly male patients, mostly male PTSD, mostly male services, male clinics, things like that. As this conflict has gone on, more and more female vets have been coming to us in large numbers for the first time. We found out very quickly that, one size does not fit all. We had to come back to the services, particularly the Army, and ask for some advice in some areas to help set up some things. One of the things logically is that whether you're in the military, a veteran, or a civilian, depending whether you're a male or a female, you may only want to see a doctor of your sex. So how do we make that available for our patients? And we're doing that right now. We've set up women-only clinics, and we've set up mental health procedures that deal specifically with women veterans. One of the things we're finding is I travel around a lot, and when I travel, I try to go to as many, VFW, AMVETS, disabled veterans, whatever's in the local community, I'll Google it and I'll go into their different, whether it's a lodge or a club or a community center, and just talk to them. When I first started doing it, I didn't see very many women vets, a lot of spouses. Now it's easily about a quarter of the people that are in there are female vets. And I get the story a lot from them that one of the things that hurts them is our society still hasn't completely recognized that women are serving side by side with men in all the armed forces. For instance, a young lady in Arizona told me last week that she was in a bar and somebody came in and saw two gentlemen that had hats on with Iraq or Afghanistan on, and he said, "Anybody in here Army veterans?" You know, people raised their hand, and he said, "Buy all the veterans a drink." And then he came over and started talking to this young soldier who was a veteran herself, served in combat, actually had a Bronze Star, and didn't recognize her as a veteran and wanted to know why she was asking for a free drink. You know, so she has to explain, yes, you know, why do you have to do that, she said. Why do I have to tell people that just because I'm a female, I'm a veteran? So those are the kind of things we're working with and dealing with it. The atmosphere in VA has now changed. We've made it more welcome for our female veterans. We have specific female clinics in the areas where we can justify the numbers and things like that. We're hiring a lot more doctors, mental health people that deal specifically with women issues. Women's medicine, a whole area of medicine that is now available in the VA that probably wasn't there after Vietnam, World War I, and World War II. First time probably that gynecologists are assigned to the VA and things like that. So we are changing. It's not a rapid change because we are so big, but I think we're there in the major areas. We're there outside the military installations, and we grow and we learn every day. And part of what helps us is our partnership with the services, because the services are already working with this problem before we get that. So if we can sit down and talk with them, and we do, and get their advice and try to hire a lot of their doctors and nurses when they leave, you know, it helps us in developing those programs as we move forward. Thank you.
That was not a job interview request there. So the question is, installation programs contribute significantly to enhancing resilience and are an important part of the care continuum. As the behavioral health care system shifts more focused to prevention and wellness, how are the installation programs and behavioral health programs integrating in order to achieve improved effectiveness and effective application of resources? A great question, and thanks. And so you can see, first of all, right here at the beginning that we're sitting together, and even that signals the importance that the Chief, the Sergeant Major of the Army, and the Vice have put on this. We meet every other week, and our staffs meet in between in what we've called a triad to have the Surgeon General and the G1 and MCOM/AXIM to take on and move on issues. With regard to installation services, you know, it takes you back to just about a year ago. A young sergeant asked me, Staff Sergeant Jacob Foster, I was at my son's family day, and he said, "General Farrader, welcome back from Iraq. What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Hey, Sergeant Foster, great question. I want to be the AXIM of the Army." And he looked down at the ground and looked back up and said, "What's that?" And he gave really great advice. I said, well, and I think it answers this question. I said, it's almost anything that's going to happen in this great Army, this great strong Army. And as we look at the wellness and we look at taking care of patient care, we have a big, strong, healthy part of the Army also. And so everyone's probably working an issue in your life, and we know that. And so across Army Community Service, across our morale, welfare, and recreation, and our child and youth programs, we can reach everybody who needs help. And as General Allen and I were talking, you know, 2/3 of our soldiers and families live off the installation, so we have to be able to extend in that direction also. But I'd highlight to you, and we are, I'd highlight to you in the Army Community Service, great programs like the Family Readiness Support Activities and the Military Family Life Consultants. They assist the deployed and the deploying families, and they assist in taking the stress out of the soldier, out of the unit, and off of the families as we have deployments. Yesterday was an inspiring day to meet with our survivors. And again, through the many programs that we've partnered with and our survivor outreach services that the Army is the champion of and the best in the federal government, we take care of our surviving folks. And so that's a key part as well. And if a soldier knows when he or she deploys that the Army's got their back if anything tragic happens, then that's another reduction method for stress. We also still have this firm commitment to the Army Family Covenant as well as the Army Community Covenant. And through folks like Soldier for Life, we're going to reach out within the communities where there's plenty of folks who want to help our soldiers and families as well. In the area of child youth services and school programs like teen programs and 3-on-3 basketball at night and sock hops and all those kind of very healthy things that as many of us been on an installation and you hear, how do you stop shoplifting? And someone says more MPs, and we say no, more activities, more healthy activities that create strong self-esteem and a belief in Army values. So those programs reside and come out of our child youth services. And then we still, and we will, have deployment child care and respite care for those, the NCOs and the WTUs, and those soldiers and leaders who are deployed, so that the families back home are taken care of. And then finally, in fitness and recreation, you know, we say do PT twice a day, and that's a good thing. But again, strong bodies, great energy, and the intramural program. There's a second question on tell us more about intramurals. But the chief has asked us to establish a program for intramurals where senior commanders will just re-energize and take us back to the days where so many company teams are playing in sports like soccer and basketball, volleyball, football, combatives, and cross country. But we're going to pull them up to battalion championships once a year, in summertime, once a year, wintertime, for those sports. And again, that feeling of being a winner will come back. We're very closely linked at every echelon, beginning with the Secretary and the Secretariat. We have several Assistant Secretaries of the Army in the room, so that we get the right money at the right place to the right soldier and family. And then as you go down through the commands of the Army, we're very well integrated all the way into the installation, where the medical treatment team and the preventions team and the care team and the installation team and the units are one team. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in there with General Ferreter on the question of, so how are you meeting the needs of the population with regard to behavioral health? And he talked about the point of where our people are that need the assistance. And the vast majority of them are living in the communities that surround the military base, not on the military base. And so this concept of teaming with our communities is vital. And so what are we talking about in the average military base? Not to say that Fort Bragg is average, we would say it's extraordinary. But we have only 50% of our 56,000 soldiers live on the base. The rest live in the communities. 70% of our 76,000 families live in the communities. All 96,000 of our retirees live in the community. So very quickly you recognize that it's about 70% of our 256,000 soldiers and families that reside in the community. So teaming with our communities is a critical component to getting this right. And so how are we doing that? Well, at Fort Bragg and in the Fort Bragg community, our civilian leadership and our medical community have started an annual forum called Forward March that brings all the community experts in behavioral health together in a forum so that we communicate directly and transparently with each other about what is the challenge and opportunity that we're facing, where are the resources that may not be fully tapped, and then how do we bring them together in a cohesive way. that better integrates everything that's out there and, oh, by the way, takes some pressure off our hospital system on the base and our providers in Army Community Services. So that's a way that we're trying to get after that, and it's critical as we move forward, not just at Fort Bragg, but everywhere in our Army. Thanks.
So I think it's important for us to understand is the intramural program, re-energizing it and refocusing our attention on it, is really about bringing soldiers out of the barracks, engaging them with leaders, and getting after something that is physically demanding. And if you recognize what General Ferriter said, none of those were individual sports. They're all team sports. The Army is a team organization, and it's about reestablishing that same sense of commitment that our soldiers have experienced while they've been deployed for 10 years, and taking them out of the barracks, out of their rooms,